Alright guys, welcome back to the Chaser channel. Hope everybody's doing well. We are going to talk today about the new Tennessee regulations and its impact on smallmouth bass fisheries, what an example it sets today for other states following suit with this expansive invasion of the Alabama bass strain, spotted bass strain of the Alabama bass, that they're going to be going into effect August of this year. There are some other states in the works with some more regulations, but Tennessee's kind of lagged a little bit behind some of the other states. But it is important to note the significant changes that they are making to their regulations and changes to their trophy bass management program in terms of how they have tried to maintain some really good sizable smallmouth bass populations in a lot of their lakes in Tennessee, especially in the Chattanooga area. Last week, the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission passed by a unanimous vote, by the way, the concerning regulations governing the smallmouth bass creel limits in the Chattanooga area lakes. Those lakes include Gunnersville, Chickamauga, Nickajack. There's also a list of about 5 or 6 other lakes that have changes to regulations as well, separate from this specific change that we're going to talk about with Chickamauga, Nickajack, and portions of Gunnersville Lake in Tennessee. Obviously, the biggest concern for most of us as Smallie River anglers is, okay, Tennessee River. Okay, like what's going to happen in the river systems as well, but all this is going to really start at the lakes. Okay, and it's been kind of like probably an accepted practice over the last 2 decades or so in terms of available creel limits based on size, in order to increase that potential for a larger fish caught, right? So fisheries didn't want larger, usually smallmouth over 18 inches, a large abundance of them being removed from fisheries, right? And so there were always very, very low creel limits. For example, right now in Tennessee on those lakes, that creel limit is 1 smallmouth, okay? And so you've got to think about like that dynamic of how big a shift this is, okay? So you are allowed to take 1 smallmouth per day over 18 inches, okay? And they did that to try and keep that larger bass population, plus healthier fish, bigger fish, better DNA. These fish are 10, 11, 12 years old. They then spawn, and their DNA continues with the next generation of have very strong strain, the ability to get that big and to grow that big. That's like pretty much your baseline, mindset into how they trophy management a particular fishery. It doesn't really matter on the size. But effective on August 1st, 2025, it will be legal to keep 5 smallmouth per day, any length, okay? Except only one of those can exceed 16 inches, okay? So today, you were only allowed to keep 1 smallmouth bass a day exceeds 18s, and now you're allowed to keep 1 bass a day that's over 16, and then you can keep 4 any length whatsoever. And there's been some debate in terms of how this will impact 2, 3, 5 years out, because the reality of it is management is losing to the Alabama bass strain, okay? There's not any real effective protocols other than us removing the spotted bass ourselves from our fisheries, which, as you guys know, in Virginia, since 2021, we have had a regulation from the state passed that they have placed the Alabama bass on the predatory and undesirable species list. So they've encouraged anglers for 4 years to remove Alabama bass from every fishery. So they want anglers, if you catch an Alabama bass, or if you even suspect that it's an Alabama bass and it's within the creel limit guidelines of black bass for your fishery, to go ahead and remove it. And so, we've had that in Virginia for 4 years now. Tennessee hasn't had something like that. And now they see the rising tide of what's called an expansive range, the range of, we always talk about native range, okay? Well, Alabama bass is not native to any of these states, Tennessee, West Virginia, Maryland, okay? They're not native to those states. The concern has been over the last decade what has happened in North Carolina, to North Carolina's, I would say, formerly premier largemouth fisheries, okay? Because the Alabama bass decimates those fisheries. They decimate largemouth bass in terms of being overly aggressive. They're habitat predators, okay? And they can destroy, a lot of forage because of how aggressive they are. And of course, in terms of the smallmouth, they mate with smallmouth. So what happens is you have a degradation of your DNA strain. The DNA strain, okay, that's a natural native DNA strain that produces 20-inch smallmouth bass. The strain produces 20-inch smallmouth citation bass in places like the New River, the James River, okay, the Holston River in Tennessee, the Susquehanna in Pennsylvania, the Yaak, the Allegheny, okay, in western Pennsylvania and in western Maryland as well, and western Pennsylvania, the Ohio River, okay. Right now we've got pretty much an artificial. We are on the front lines, guys. We are on the front lines of what is going to change over the next decade. Smallmouth bass fishing populations, the biggest change in populations in our lifetimes. Okay, and it's not positive. Okay, if we don't all get involved and get engaged in this. Okay, because sure, if you're in Ohio right now, or you're in Pennsylvania, or you're in New York, or places like that, or you're on Erie, or in the Midwest, and it's like, Alabama bass isn't an issue for you yet. And I stress yet, okay? Because in a decade, they're going to be there, okay? Because guys are transporting them, because the education hasn't been there, okay? Hopefully we can get the education to the level of don't do it. First of all, it's illegal in a lot of states now. It will be illegal, even more illegal, is that a phrase? In Tennessee coming up. In Virginia, it's a Class 3 misdemeanor for now. It will probably become a felony in the next 3 years if you're caught transporting live Alabama or spotted bass. Could be Kentucky spotted bass, whatever it is, and they catch you, then there's a good shot in the next 3 to 4 years it's going to be a felony. It's going to be a Class 6 felony in the state of Virginia. Okay? That's how serious this is in terms of decimating fishing populations. And the guys that didn't have the forethought, didn't have the education, didn't know, or they thought they were doing something to produce big fish. Well, what happens is you don't get big fish with Alabama bass. You don't. You destroy your largemouth population. You stunt the growth of your smallmouth population, because if they mate and they hybridize, you're not going to get a 20-inch smallmouth. You need that pure genetic DNA for a 20-inch smallmouth, guys. Okay? And that's what's at stake right now. Okay? And so got to take that under consideration. The new Tennessee law, again, this will not go into effect until August 1st in events. So in events that you may have in Tennessee at these particular lakes. And again, I believe you've got the other regulations are really, really set at trying to mitigate the damage that's coming. That's going to be very, very hard for fisheries management because of how invasive the Alabama bass is. I read this on my own other channel. You can check out a longer form video on this topic at JL Scott Fishing on YouTube. But it's horrible. Anglers open Pandora's box. If we do not stop the illegal stocking of Alabama bass into the other reservoirs, we will lose smallmouth bass in the state of Tennessee. It's coming if we don't give this attention that it deserves. We will lose smallmouth bass in the state of Tennessee. That is how bad this can be, okay? And how invasive these Alabama bass are and detrimental to your fisheries. So pass it along to the people that you know, or people that you know are active in fishing community, because there really is no benefit size wise and to Alabama bass. You taking an Alabama bass and putting it in, there's really not. Now the argument has been they produce faster and faster. True, they produce more fish for that reservoir faster, but the fish don't ever have. They're never going to be. They're not trophy fish. They won't get to be trophy fish. Okay, and so again, that's where I think the education, the biology didn't catch up with what people were thinking would happen if they introduced these fish, and they certainly didn't know that by the hybridization with smallmouth, that the DNA strain would be changed forever. And then you start losing your native smallmouth population, and then your population becomes strictly a hybrid population that can't get to a 20-inch citation level smallmouth, like we've seen in our river systems. I mean, this is a huge threat. Right now, Virginia is on the front lines of this battle, because there have been a few reports in West Virginia. There haven't been any reports yet in Maryland or Pennsylvania. But you've got to remember that New River travels north, okay, from North Carolina all the way through Virginia into West Virginia and parts beyond, right? Okay, and that becomes a highway. When you get major flooding, Hurricane Helene, major flooding, takes beyond Claytor Lake, takes them downriver, keeps them going. It's a matter of time. Again, these things don't happen overnight. They happen over the course of decades. And it just it's transformational to a fishery. Guys in North Carolina have already seen it, okay, with the decimation of largemouth bass fisheries. Okay, Lake Norman's the biggest example. And so some of the other, I want to read you off. Limits have changed. They voted to change the creel limits on all black bass in Pickwick, Watts Bar, Tellico, Fort Loudon, and Chilhowee reservoirs, okay? Currently, each of those lakes have differing regulations for creel limits. So they've now standardized the creel limit for all of those lakes, okay? They want to simplify these things and establish a consistent creel limit. 5 bass, okay, 5 black bass, all species, in combination daily, with a 15-inch minimum length limit, okay? And so that's what they've done on Pickwick, which is loaded with smallies, right? Trust me when I say this. If Alabama bass get into Pickwick, I mean, you can forget Pickwick being an elite level smallie fishery, okay? You can, all right? That's just the truth. And so these are things that like everyone has to be aware of. Please pass along. If you live in Virginia, obviously I could send you, I will put my email address in the video here. You guys know how to reach me. I will send you the invasive alert brochure from Virginia. It's got the phone numbers for contact for everything when you're in Virginia and you come across an Alabama bass. There's also got, you can request to get the envelopes. I've got some around. I'll try and dig them up again for this year. But it's where you take that pelvic fin, and you put it in that envelope, and you mail that fin to the state, and they test it. And they look at that DNA to find out whether or not it's just a spotted bass or an Alabama bass. If because you really can't tell visually anymore. You certainly cannot tell visually when you look at a smallmouth bass if it's a native smallmouth or then a hybrid smallmouth. Just visually looking at it, it's very, very difficult. Okay. So you got to take that fin, and then the state will test it and then get back and let you know. And then once you know that, then you kind of know, in terms of what's happening, and they increase the range. Okay, they put it basically just data dotted on maps of where these things, and they can see the range slowly increasing. Okay, and that's what we all want to work together to prevent, because if we don't, our smallie fisheries are going to be decimated, and we're not going to be able to pass along. This is one issue that kind of like crosses the bass anglers, boaters, kayakers, fly fishermen, waders, bank fishermen, okay? This is one that we all can get behind, okay? And so when we form the Smallie, the Smallie River Alliance, okay, and concerning smallmouth and the preservation and protection of smallmouth. This is what it's about, guys. This is the battle that is in front of us. And if you've got a son or daughter who's 5 years old right now, by the time they're 15, 16, 17 years old, the smallmouth bass populations can be changed forever. Forever. And we're not going to get it back. You can't reverse DNA. We're not going to be able to get it back. Okay? And so if you notice, a lot of states aren't stocking smallmouth anymore in the Mid-Atlantic region. And the biggest reason for that is they haven't been able to get ahead of the threat that looms. They're not going to spend money on stocking a species that basically inevitably is going to get run over like a train wreck, okay? Because they cannot, without our help, they cannot stop the invasiveness and influx of Alabama bass into Virginia, into Tennessee, ultimately into West Virginia. And if it gets to Maryland, it's going to get to Pennsylvania. And then you're going to have a decimated Susquehanna River fishery, okay, that is well known for smallmouth. And if it gets into the Susquehanna, then it gets into New York. And then all those Smallie fisheries up in New York, okay, are going to be at risk, okay? That is really the deal, okay, of what's going on. So, Tennessee TFWC changing its regulations and creel limits really is a direct result of the threat of the future that's coming, okay? And as well as populations. They want to do what they can to maintain that trophy style bass population. Okay, on two fronts. Managing the natural population, but also preventing that population from being threatened by the Alabama bass that is on the doorstep. All right, guys.